Welcome back to Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Bill, we're back in our houses and our studios, and I'm back from Vegas, and I forgot how to do the show.
Listen, the guy goes to Vegas for a few days, gets a little fuzzy when he comes back. You know, it's understandable.
I could have stayed. Can I tell you one thing that happened in Vegas really quick? This is how dumb I am. This is an example of how dumb I am, which is why it's good that I made it back from Vegas at all. So the Mirage Casino has a Cirque du Soleil. We're going to talk about Kirby Smart, by the way. And we're going to talk about Kirby Smart in Georgia in a way that it feels like nobody else in the country is talking about Kirby Smart in Georgia, which makes that a northern issue, because this is not just a northern show. It's a college football show through a northern lens, and we are going to apply that lens. There's snow on our lens today, Landis. And usually when you're talking dogs, ain't no snow on the lens. So that's what we're getting ready to do. My daughter likes the Beatles. My younger daughter likes the Beatles. And the Mirage has a Cirque du Soleil Beatles show. Mm-hmm. And I walked through the Mirage. I saw like the cool lobby of the Beatles show. At the top of the Mirage, they have a big giant sign. The whole top of the hotel is the four Beatles guys' heads, right? And I was like, oh man. I took a picture and sent it to my daughter, and she's like, oh, cool. Is that like a limited show? And I was like, no, it's here forever. And I said, we'll keep an eye on it. And if it ever looks like it's going to close, we'll come out here and see it. Mm-hmm. That was on Monday. It actually turns out that the 18-year run of that Beatles Cirque du Soleil show had ended the day before. An 18-year run. And the day that I noticed it is the first day ever in 18 years it hadn't run. And now they're tearing the casino down. Yeah. So as I was telling my daughter, like, hey, cool, no, we'll make sure we get to see it. Trust me. It was like already dead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you know, they're tearing down the Mirage, right?
No, I don't. So now I have to explain to my daughter, but at least it was already dead. It wasn't like I was there the last day it was alive. It was after it was dead. But that is my awareness of the world. I look at a dead thing and I'm like, looks good to me. We'll definitely do that.
We should go do that.
So just another moment of me disappointing my children. Okay. We're back. We're going to be at Big Ten Media Days next week. We'll be there for 3 days at Big Ten Media Days. We'll have extra shows from there. We don't exactly have our plan, but we're going to have a lot of folks and a lot of talking and a lot of fun at Big Ten Media Days. I thought Big 12 Media Days went well. It was a good test run for us, but, you know, Indy's right down the road from where we are, and we've been to Big Ten Media Days a million different times, and the people there know us a little bit better, so what we bring you from Big Ten Media Days will be even better than what we brought you from Big 12 Media Days. We are not at SEC Media Days. As we record this on Tuesday afternoon, Landis, after watching the Kirby Smart news conference on Tuesday morning, should we have been there?
Seems like it. Yeah. I don't think we would have asked about, you know, what Kirby thinks of Texas and, you know, how's the whole NIL thing going? So yeah, maybe we should have been there.
So what we want to talk about is the issue with Georgia driving, and that this does, I believe it is, we'll talk this out. I think it's the number one issue in college football right now. And it's like, I know that sport is changing, and I understand there's some bumpy roads and figuring out paying players and NIL and all those things, but this is real life stuff. And I want us to have a good discussion about when real life intrudes on college football, and how all of us as fans, all of us as media members, all of us who care about the sport, how we should think about college football when real life issues are at stake. And the issues around Georgia driving, I think, are real life issues because 2 people were killed as a result of the issues around Georgia driving in January of 2023. And Kirby Smart, what has come up is there were 2 more players cited for driving issues, reckless driving in recent days, and Tuesday at SEC Media Days was Kirby Smart's first chance to address the latest things, which by the count of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they have a story that says it's been 27 separate incidents in the last 17 months. Okay. So did you not feel like there was a little bit of anticipation around college football for, okay, this is going to be Kirby Smart's opportunity to address the latest issues, which are part of a bigger issue?
Yeah, especially because it was a venue where it wasn't just like local Georgia media, and I don't mean to paint the local Georgia media necessarily with a broad brush, but like you're more likely, I think, maybe to get somebody to ask more of a probing question who's not there every day. So this is an opportunity for that. But as we'll talk about, that did not happen, or at least didn't happen publicly.
Yeah, so it didn't happen publicly, and we'll get a little inside journalism on some of this. Some people like that, some people don't. We're not going to do that right off the top. We're going to talk about the issue and talk about Georgia football and how we should think about it. But it did not come up in the public news conference that was broadcast on the SEC network. That was what the average fan saw, right? The front-facing public persona of Georgia in that moment. 11 questions, a 9-minute filibuster by Kirby of just talking about, maybe actually 11 minutes, I think. I wrote down the timing. Just got up there and blathered on as many. He's not the first coach to do that, but 11 minutes of nothing, and then 11 questions, none of which were about driving issues. But he was asked about it in a reporter session before the podium, right? And so I just want to read some of his answers, and I am reading from Mark Weiser in the Athens Banner Herald, which was the first story I saw about this. There are other Georgia reporters who have put up other stories, but these are the quotes that Kirby Smart gave those reporters away from the microphone. The latest thing, again, is that linebackers Smail Mondon and freshman DeMello Jones were charged with racing on the streets on Wednesday, and Mondon was charged with reckless driving. The incidents that we've had off the field are not something that we condone, Smart said Tuesday, again from the Athens Banner Herald. It's very unfortunate, disappointing, I guess is the best word. I always talk about process and outcomes. I talked about that with wins and losses, that we try not to base things on the outcomes with wins and losses. In this situation, the outcomes are very disappointing. He also did say that a backup safety who had previously been cited in February for reckless driving has been dismissed from the team. He only called it for a violation of team rules, but he is one of the players who's had a driving incident. Smart also said that they are fining players through their NIL payments from Classic City Collective. That this is kind of an interesting way. It's a little bit of an NFL model of, we're going to fine you. Now that you're making money, we're going to work with the collective to fine you. From the story, he indicated suspensions are coming, but he did not say specifically like which players might be suspended. We'll have suspensions coming out of some of these, he said. I think everybody wants to know what game and are they suspended. That's probably an important thing in terms of the discipline, the culture that they get to experience. We've done more, as far as I know. There's not one team in the country that's ever suspended a player for traffic violations. Our process and the things we put in place, I feel very strongly about. We do as much or more education as anybody in the country. And then Carson Beck, who has a Lamborghini, was asked about it. He said, let's clarify, I don't like fast cars. I like cars. Obviously, my car is fast, but I don't drive like an idiot. And then Smart said he doesn't want to name players who will be suspended ahead of their actual suspensions. Quote, I don't necessarily think it's right to go down to the town square and publicly shame kids. When that happens, they go through a lot, and there's a lot of remorse from these young men who've made mistakes, but our job is to educate, continue to grow these young men. Okay, that's what he said. We are here to shame Georgia, just to be clear. That is what we're going to do here today, and we're going to talk about how much shame should be brought upon Georgia and how much shame Georgia should feel here. That's different than shaming individual players who we understand are young, and lots of people make mistakes in life when they are of that age. You just hope you don't make the kind of mistakes that lead to the loss of someone's life, your own or someone else's. What did you think of Kirby Smart's remarks from the reporters? Again, tip of the cap to the reporters covering the team who were there and got these answers out of Kirby Smart away from the TV cameras.
Yeah, like Kirby, I don't know. Kirby's like almost there, right? Like I just think he does need to be more public about the shaming, if you want to call it that, but like the discipline, and maybe the being more public with the discipline doesn't actually yield any results, but that kind of feels like the only thing they can do, right? I don't know what the other courses of action might be. Why does the discipline have to happen like in secret? Why, I just don't understand that part of it. So it's like you almost compound the issue a little bit by by doing that. And I still think there's an opportunity for Kirby to be kind of more out there with his thoughts on this. Clearly he doesn't, or I think clearly he thinks it's an issue, or else I think he could have been more dismissive of it. But like, I think the only way it changes is if like the head coach is out there like more forcefully with the message against it, and it just doesn't seem like he wanted to go quite to that extent. So, which was like a little bit of a bummer, I guess. Ultimately, not surprising. So like it wasn't nothing, right? He could have been wholly dismissive of it. He could have said, "We keep that in house. We're not talking about it. We're talking about ball. This is media days." So like, I'm glad he didn't do that. But there was definitely an opportunity for him to like get out in front of it even more than he did, in a way that I actually think could have been helpful to actually curtailing the issue. And I don't think he did that.
So we want to come up with some suggested solutions for Georgia and advice we would give Kirby Smart before we leave this topic. But for the moment, again, I want to remind people, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which has been sort of leading the reporting on this in a lot of ways, 27 separate incidents in the last 17 months. The most tragic, of course, the January 2023 deaths of a recruiting staffer and of player Devin Willock. Willock was a passenger in a car driven by that recruiting staffer. If you aren't intimately aware of all these things, it was a recruiting staffer who was legally drunk racing Jalen Carter, future NFL first-round draft pick. They were on a road. I actually was looking on Google Maps at checking out the road again. It's a 2-lane road, one on each side with some trees on either side. It's a 40-mile-per-hour road. The police report after the fact indicated they were driving in excess of 100 miles per hour. They were racing side by side. The recruiting staffer was drunk, well over the legal limit, and she was killed in the crash, and Devin Willock was killed in the crash. And like, this is how real this is. I think Devin Willock would maybe be starting on Georgia's offensive line right now if he had not been killed in that incident. He had started a couple games in 2022. This is real life stuff, right? And so that brought it to the forefront. A lawsuit was filed by Dave Willock, who is Devin Willock's father. It was filed in May of 2023, a civil lawsuit seeking, I believe, in excess of $30 million from various parties. It does not name Kirby Smart in the lawsuit, but it does name the Georgia Athletic Department. It does name several people on the Georgia staff, a recruiting person, an operations person, the people, the car dealership that had given Jalen Carter the car as part of an NIL deal, the bar that had served the recruiting staffer who was driving and was killed. That lawsuit has been continually delayed. You can look at the docket. I was looking through the docket for that lawsuit. There are motions in place from this month, and nothing has come of it. I also read the 54-page lawsuit, like the claims in there. Again, this is just their side of things, but it's a public document. One of the things they claim is that Jalen Carter had a reckless driving ticket previously, and he did not show up for court for it. And the ops person employed by the Georgia football program went and paid his tickets. He had $1,000 worth of tickets. He didn't show up in court. He had his license suspended by the state of Florida because he did not take a reckless driving course as required by his driving incidents. So he had at the time of the crash, of the deadly crash that he was intimately involved in, his license was suspended. So that's in the lawsuit. One of the other things that's in the lawsuit is that the recruiting staffer had a high speed violation previously that people above her were aware of, and they still put her in a situation to be driving cars leased by the Georgia Athletic Department. She was tasked with driving players around that night. It wasn't incidental. That was part of her job as a recruiting staffer, knowing that she had this in her past. So that is part of the lawsuit, that there are people within the Georgia department who are aware, who are sort of, and this is part of the issue, Bill, like what should happen when there are driving issues within a football program? Previously, they didn't do anything, right? They knew people, players, people employed by the program were doing things, were breaking the law with their driving, and they didn't address it. I don't want to say they covered it up, but they knew about it and they just like paid the tickets and kept doing business as usual. And it led to a fatal crash. So we've seen in the past when Georgia treats it business as usual, there are tragic consequences. So to say now, what is different? Why is it show the world, but more show your players, show the families of your players, show your fans that it's not business as usual, because that didn't work in the past. Right. So I think there is such seriousness to the issue here of sometimes in college sports. And I think this era is past, by the way, we can bang the drum about silly things. Have we done that in the past in college football?
Yeah, we have.
This is not one of those.
No,
this is a real thing. So I wanted to lay that groundwork there. I think there are, when the things keep happening and there's something this tragic in the past, to continually ask about how are you solving this, because it's not solved. If players got, if stuff happened last week, it's not solved. You must keep asking about how are you going to solve it, right? You can't stop asking until the problem is gone.
Yeah, especially now. Like I think Kirby has, in a sense, like kicked that can even further down the road, because it's like, oh, well, our collective has been finding players, and that's been going on for a while. You guys didn't know about that, but they've been doing that for a while. We've had continuous, education on the matter. Like that's how we've chosen to address it. And like holding that up as like proof of like, see, we're doing something to help fix it. When like the impetus for the questions that got you to admit that information in the first place is the fact that it's still happening. Right. So it's like you're not actually doing anything to address the issue. Like you are trying to, but like clearly your methods are not effective. So you need better methods. And I think like that is now the continuing line of question for Georgia, because I don't know. It's good that they're doing something, but clearly I don't think it's satisfactory.
So let's get to the news conference then that happened on Tuesday morning and address the media's role in this. So do you think 11 questions, and I wrote down the names, everybody gives their name and their outlet. At least 3 of the questions coming in a row early on were from Dog Daily, Dog Central, and Dog Time. Dog Mentality did not get a question in, but that's because we didn't go. There are a couple Texas questions. The first question was from War Report, which is an Auburn site. I mean, there's a Huntsville, Alabama radio station. So nobody asked about it, even though he talked about it to a smaller group of Georgia reporters previously. Do you think somebody should have asked about it in the news conference?
Yeah, because it's just a different type of accountability. Like to be up there with your logo on a giant screen behind you on ESPN's airwaves. It's a different kind of megaphone to talk about it there. And it's like his quotes about it are in like well-regarded publications, like the New York Times and / The Athletic and ESPN, like all had those quotes. I'm not saying like it totally fell on deaf ears, but there is no bigger pulpit at SEC Media Days than when the coach is standing up there for his like TV show press conference. So yeah, I actually think it is probably incumbent on a journalist there to ask at least one question about it to get Kirby on the record in that setting talking about it. Even if the answers ultimately were the same, I think he needs to be asked about it in that setting.
So my opinion has changed on this, probably because my job changed. But back in the day when I was writing primarily or only, I sometimes didn't want to ask stuff in a TV setting because I didn't want to give my good question away to the world. Like you're afraid to ask it. I'm not afraid to ask it. So I'm not going to give ESPN the answer that I'm going to get on the side, because everybody else is here to slap him on the back and glad hand and play grab ass and go dog mentality. So I'm going to be a real journalist, and I don't want to give that to you. But sitting at home, watching that on ESPN, waiting for someone to ask the question, the public accountability part of it popped into my head in a much bigger way. So somebody should have asked, but that's kind of like the somebody, everybody, nobody kind of thing that people hang on the wall. It's like everybody's waiting for somebody else to do it. But maybe some of the somebodies were like, well, I'm not going to do it because I already got it off to the side. But I think somebody still should have. Because public accountability on TV, we're old newspaper reporters, man, right? But that still is the most impactful thing. There is not a clip that can be shown on TV newscasts or pulled out. We were going to play it here, except there is none.
Yeah,
there
and
is
also
none because nobody put him on the spot.
Yeah, and now too, because like Kirby will do more. I think like they do breakout sessions, right? At SEC Media Days with the head coaches. Like now, if it's asked in that setting where there probably will be cameras rolling, all he'll do is refer to the answers he gave earlier in the day, right? So like you don't get that conversation like on camera where like the most people can access it. Yeah, so like I guess I don't want to be hypocritical because I am like you. Like if I were a beat writer covering Georgia or like a reporter there, and I felt like I was the only person or part of a very small group of people who actually like was willing and felt capable and sort of obliged to ask those kind of questions. Not sort of obliged to ask those kind of questions. Maybe I wouldn't have done it in that setting only because like, well, it's like screw you. I'm not going to give everybody this answer, but we are coming at it from a different perspective now. So yeah, I was watching it, waiting, both like when he was on the podium getting asked questions by reporters, and also when he was on ESPN's set, and wasn't asked about it too. Is Nick Saban going to be the guy asking the question? Be a hell of a thing if he was, but clearly he's not going to. I guess there's not a journalist on that set though. It's like Nick Saban and two former players. But I guess if you want to be someone who is like given those opportunities, maybe you should be willing to ask questions along those lines too. And he wasn't questioned about it by ESPN either.
So here's the main point I want to make now that we're 20 minutes into the show. And I think we need to give a baseline for this. And again, I understand some people find this sort of inside football journalism, media conversation interesting. Some just want to talk about football. That's why we love to talk about football on here most of the time. I do think the perception around Georgia and Kirby Smart needs to change in a major way until they prove that they have this under control. And the comparison I'll make is Urban Meyer at Florida. And I think clearly by the end of Urban Meyer at Florida, the Gators and his program there, what they were doing, they were known, I think this is fair, as a rule-breaking program. He had, I believe, it was either 30 or 31 arrests between 2005 and 2010 at Florida. And when he got to Ohio State, where you and I both covered him, when he came to Ohio State, that number was burned in people's brains.
Mm-hmm.
Was it not? Did you feel like that? Now, I don't know if it was by 08 for sure. There was definitely stuff happening in 08. So they win the second national title in 08. But by the end of Florida, and then after the fact of Florida, for sure, that was Urban Meyer's reputation. Winning, but do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I do, 100%. And I actually think for some people, like the but like overshadowed the winning, right? Like I think if you ask 10 people about like what do you think of Urban Meyer's tenure at Florida, you might get like 5 or 6 who talk about the arrest before they talk about the championships.
So I understand it maybe took some time there to do that, but I think we are entering that time. I think maybe Urban got 2 titles without people asking too many questions, right? Like 6 and 8, but then by 9 and 10, 2010, Chris Rainey gets kicked off the team. That's a little bit of a line in the sand. Again, I'm researching all this. You're finding a lot of stories like from 2010 when the number gets up, like the number gets above 30. So I think we're there with Kirby because they won the 2 and it was win, 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 win. But now this thing happened. Now we're a year and a half removed from it. And here's my point. Kirby Smart is not Nick Saban. Kirby Smart is Urban Meyer. And let's treat him that way. It does not eliminate the winning, but it is time to add a but to everything that happens with Georgia football and to everything that Kirby Smart has accomplished, because this is an ongoing issue. It is a danger to the people of Athens. It is a danger to his own players, and it is repeated and representative of what Georgia football is right now. And if anybody wants to just focus on the winning, you're wrong. It has reached that point. And we, as the media, certainly have responsibility in that because we help shape public opinion. So he's not Saban, and we'll talk a little bit about that more on this show and then later this week when we're going to do a Nick Saban show. But he is Urban Meyer, and I don't think we are anywhere close to the general perception of Kirby Smart being attached to a negative in the way that we absolutely got there with Urban Meyer. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. Yeah, I don't know why that's the case, but yeah, I think it's absolutely true.
I don't know either. Like, why do you think there is reluctance here? Because listen, like if you want to go back, anybody wants to go back and find the 30 or 31 arrests for Florida players in that period of time. It's a wide variety of things, right? Mm-hmm. This is a specific thing. And Aaron Hernandez, obviously, what a horrible, tragic, that person turned out to be a danger to the world, right? Like, we understand that. And you didn't know that at the time, but you did maybe have an indication that there's an issue with this person and other people around them. 2 people have already died at Georgia. And I feel like it has been continually, I don't know if it's swept under the rug because it's not like people don't acknowledge it, but it feels like they don't care. I don't know why more people don't care about this when it killed a player. And we're going to talk a little bit more about like college football scandals. There's not many that killed a player. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that Kirby Smart is responsible for that. That would be totally unfair. But it is absolutely 100% related to Georgia football. And whatever phrasing you want to use, whether that means culture, whether that means discipline, whatever, it's related to Georgia football in a specific and real way. And I feel like the conversation around that team is 99%. Are they going to win another one? They're the best program in college football. And you must attach it to them to attempt to shame them, to attempt to get things to change, to protect people. So like, that's what we're doing here. We're just one little show in the North. But that news conference today led me to question if anybody down there is going to do it.
Doesn't seem like it. We were talking about it beforehand, and I was like kind of hopeful, like, well, it's in Dallas. It's like a different setting. There's some different people there than like normally. It's not like necessarily a bunch of people who've just been covering the SEC forever. And like, that didn't really, it was the same. And like, listen, like, I don't, if it was Kirby Smart was doing this in the Big Ten, would he have gotten asked the question there? If you or I were there, probably, right? But otherwise, I'm not sure. So, it is odd. I don't know, like, if it's, is it like Kirby Smart's like connection to Saban that like shields him from some of this? I don't know. Like, is it because he had this perception of like he is the next king of college football? Let us like dare not question his methods because he's going to be at the top very soon. I have no idea, but he has dodged it, and I don't even know. It feels like not even like intentionally. So he's just like kind of like I don't know that Kirby necessarily has like put a lot in motion to avoid being questioned about it. It's just like people don't seem to be interested in diving into it all that much.
So I think there's a couple things that happened there. One is that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution led the reporting on this, and their lead reporter on it fabricated some things, exaggerated some things, and got fired. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that a lot of what the reporting there that was still true, but it allowed, this is why you can't. I support journalism. Journalists often drive me crazy because journalists are fallible human beings, just like all of us. But that's why you can't do it, because like everybody's looking for one little morsel to say, well, this was wrong. You screwed up this. So it invalidates everything. Then when you like are going out of your way to do that, sometimes we make mistakes by accident. But people are looking for that. And the AJC gave them that. And now they fired that guy, but that was certainly part of it. But there's a little, like, some part of me is waiting for like the national college football media to be loosed on Georgia. And I don't know why that hasn't happened, because I will say again, there are people on the Georgia beat who are asking questions about this, who are writing about this. I know there is a sentiment there clearly that's been expressed, I think, on some message boards and in the written word of like, this is too much. This has gone too far. So the people around the team aren't just throwing up their hands and shrugging their shoulders. But where's ESPN on this?
Yeah. That's the biggest question for me is like, where is ESPN on this?
Yeah. Where is ESPN on this? ESPN camps out. Has a history of camping out at places for much less, right? Don't they?
Yeah. Yes.
Camp out. So I think I'm going to take a break. And I want to talk about some of the other problematic issues in recent years in college football and why this maybe is not being addressed the same way in the national media. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises back with Bill Landis, a little more serious than we normally are here. But there is, I wanted to drop this on Bill. So one of the comparisons that I wanted to make to the news conference with Kirby Smart on Tuesday was the news conference at Big Ten Media Days with Urban Meyer in 2018, when the day before Ohio State fired Zach Smith for allegations of domestic abuse. Again, it was only allegations. He was never convicted of anything, right? But like, and whatever role Urban Meyer or Ohio State may or may not have played, and no things and not acting previously, but the timing on that was the day before Zach Smith got fired, and then Urban showed up at Big Ten Media Day. So that was even fresher than this, but I think it's a decent comparison that this happened last week, and now Kirby Smart showed up here. Decent comparison in your mind?
Yeah, like different stories, but I think maybe like similar like journalistic methods in terms of like trying to get information about it. Yeah.
And I'm not here to I'm not here to downplay anything that Urban Meyer did. He got suspended for this as a result. Gene Smith got suspended for this. It was intolerable. What Ohio State's role in this, again, Zach Smith was never found guilty of anything, but that was like more tangential than this, right? That was Urban Meyer not disciplining a staff member for a personal thing away from football, right? This is football players continuing to do a thing that previously led to the death of a football player. So that, I just think when things are more directly tied to the health and welfare of the players that you were in charge of, that matters more to me. Like to be a step away, it doesn't mean what happened with Urban Meyer and Zach Smith didn't matter, but I actually think this is more serious. What do you think of that comparison?
Yeah, I think it's probably more serious, or there's more like I don't know the right word for it, but yeah, I think there's like more information, like more like concrete information available about this and its seriousness probably maybe than there was for that story with Urban.
Direct culpability relating to football, right? That the Zach Smith accusation is very serious, but it is sort of like a step removed from football because it doesn't directly affect the players as much. You could argue that having that person coach the players directly affects them. But anyway, so Urban Meyer had a news conference, and I went back and watched it to try to compare it to the news conference on Tuesday. And do you know what the first question was to Urban Meyer on that day in the public news conference at Big Ten Media Days?
The first one?
Yeah.
No, I know what I asked, but I don't know if that was the first one.
You know why you know? Because you asked the first question, and it was about Zach Smith.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure if that was the first question or not.
The second question was asked by our very own Austin Ward from the podcast, who asked about replacing Zach Smith, right? Third question, also about Zach Smith, asked by me. Fourth question, also about Zach Smith, asked by me. Fifth question, still pretty much about Zach Smith, asked by Bill Rubino to the Columbus Dispatch. So guess what? You can do it. You can cover a team and you can hold your coach publicly accountable. And then when we went to the side session where the cameras weren't there, I did another round of grilling Urban to the point that it was like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. But we did it publicly. And so I don't know if that's North versus South. I don't know if it's fresh that day versus a week old. I don't know if it's that Urban didn't do a side session beforehand and Kirby Smart
yes, he did.
He did?
Urban did. Yes, it was with me and Tim May and someone from ESPN whose name is escaping me. and Matt Fortuna also might have been there. But yes, because I remember that morning, you said to me, you and I were working together at Cleveland.com at the time. You said, go over there early, try to get Urban when he's getting off the elevator before he talks to anybody. And like, we weren't the only one that had that idea. It was me and Tim May were like sitting in the lobby waiting for Urban to get there. But he did. He had probably answered 5 or 6 questions about it before getting in front of a camera, and then one up in front of all the cameras. And like, I had a follow-up question, so I asked it there. But he did do a side session before.
God, you're a baller. God, you're a baller. That's why I work with you. So it could have happened. Why didn't it happen today with Kirby? Is it because we're real up here and down there? They're kowtowing and afraid of college football coaches. What is it? So you just answered every possible question of it could have happened. Yeah, absolutely could have done it.
Yeah.
There was an opening. There were 11 opportunities and nobody did it. So this is why we have to exist, because you cannot count on the South to police itself. And I'm not sure that we can count on the national media to police the South in this modern day and age. There's no proof of it at the moment. It doesn't mean there's no good journalists, but it's not to the same extent. If you think about the way that the Urban Meyer, Zach Smith situation at Ohio State was covered compared to what has happened at Georgia, there's no comparison, is there?
No, it's not even close.
What? Why? It's why we're here. It's why we're having this conversation on a Northern show. So if nobody else is going to do it, we'll continue to talk about this. And we've talked about it before. We talk about it every time we talk about Georgia. Hey, Kirby has his guy does yoga. He has his players do yoga. Love it. His players are a danger on the roadway. Don't love that. You got to include the butt when you talk about Georgia. Also, Georgia is not as good at football as you think. Let's talk about the biggest off-field issue in college football right now. You Google stuff. I looked up. Somebody made a list of like the biggest college football scandals, right? Recent times. It's not fully comprehensive. It's probably a list that this is not meant to be the end all be all, but it's a discussion point, right? So here that they listed 8 things, and I divided those 8. This is like sort of modern day. They also talked about like in the 50s, somebody had an academic scandal or whatever. It's like, oh, they cheated on a test. It's like, okay, this is more serious than that. They had 8. 2 of them were related to sort of like on-field football things. 4 of them were related to like paying players stuff that nobody cares about anymore. And 2 were real life situations that made this list. There was the Michigan sign stealing, and there was the Wake Forest thing. WikiLeaks, people called it, when like the one announcer for Wake Forest was like giving game plans away to opponents. I had kind of forgotten about that. That was like 10 years ago. Yeah. Crazy. So those are 2. These are more. Is this more serious than Connor Stallions or no? What Georgia's doing?
Yeah. Of course it is.
Is it treated that way?
No.
Does the average college football fan think that? Does the media treat it that way? I mean, we have talked about, we think what happens with Connor Stallions, which is still yet to be adjudicated, was bad. I think Georgia's driving issue is worse. And we talk about both on this show. The attention to Connor Stallions compared to the attention to a real life issue that caused the death of 2 people at Georgia and is ongoing and continuous for a year and a half. There's no comparison. It's nuts. 4 NCAA issues. The SMU stuff, Pony Express, right? Giving them money. Nevin Shapiro at Miami, giving guys money. Tattoo Gate at Ohio State, giving guys money for their and tattoos for their trophies and stuff. And Reggie Bush at USC, right? How do the 4 of those compare to an ongoing threat to public health with Georgia players driving 100 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone?
They do not. They don't compare.
They do not. Yeah. And then the 2 scandals that were like real life things off the field were obviously the Penn State Jerry Sandusky scandal, which was terrible, and the sexual assault scandal at Baylor, which was terrible, and which were both covered in immense depth. Were they not?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, right. Deservedly so. Yeah.
So I would say these are whatever. I would say the Georgia driving thing is not on the same level as that, even though 2 people have died as a result, because like the intent, I don't think the intent of what's happening at Georgia is to harm people. There was intent to harm people at Penn State and Baylor by the people involved, right? So I do want to differentiate that. But if I was going to make columns of where the Georgia thing fits, it doesn't fit with sign stealing and announcers giving away information, and it doesn't fit with paying players. It fits with real life stuff. So I'm putting the Georgia driving issue in that column, but I don't think college football as a whole has come close to putting the Georgia driving issue in that column.
No, it hasn't. And like at this point, like what would, I don't know, what would move it there? I have no idea. It really does. It baffles me. Like I was expecting when the two people died in January following their second national championship, like I thought that was going to be like maybe the biggest like off the field thing we'd seen probably since Penn State, right? That was 10 years prior, more than 10 years prior. And it just like never materialized. So and why would it now if it didn't then, right? If two people dying doesn't get you to that point, then like the occasional speeding ticket or arrest here and there certainly isn't going to, even if it's part of a much larger issue, clearly. So I don't know that we'll ever see it go there, unfortunately.
So, and I don't know how to do it. It's like Jim Tressel got put on the cover of Sports Illustrated and they wrote about how he like rigged a raffle at a recruiting camp, right? Because here's the thing, like, and again, the AJC for its faults did good reporting on this, but I don't know that we know everything that's there yet, because I don't know that, because nobody nationally has gone in and said like, we're digging this out. We're committing resources to this. And so I don't know that we have the ability here at Kings of the North to do that. I'm not so sure we shouldn't try or won't try. I do think there's probably some document stuff that we can try to do. And again, other people have done this, but I would love to see, I would call on a national sports media outlet that covers national college football in a major way and has more resources than we do to fully investigate everything that is happening with Georgia's driving issues and what coaches do and don't know, how the police in Athens are or are not involved, what is allowed or not allowed. I don't know the answers to those questions, and I think we should try to find them. So this is an official call out. Investigate this the way that you investigated players getting some money. But here's what I'm wondering, Bill, because the number one thing that drove media investigations into college sports in the previous 20 years was players getting paid, right? That was what everybody went after. And I don't want to say as guilty, but I spent my whole year in 2010 and 2011, like digging into what Terrell Pryor and the Ohio State Buckeyes did and did not receive, right, against NCAA rules. They were never putting anyone's life in danger, okay? Now that is gone, does it mean that the media has thrown up its hands and they're like, well, guess there's nothing to look into in college sports anymore because players can be paid? I feel like that might be a little bit of what is at play here when there is a real life issue staring you in the face.
Yeah, maybe. I think it is true. Because even that, like, players getting paid is like related to the on-field product, right? It is closer to a football issue, much closer to a football issue than it is necessarily like a real life issue. And a lot of people get into sports journalism because they don't want to cover real life issues, but sometimes they intersect. And when they do, you got to cover it. It's part of the job. But I think people get uncomfortable. And I guess the other part of it too, like, it doesn't have to be a sports journalistic entity that digs into it, right? Like, it doesn't, like, I don't know who it would be. I don't know who the foremost leading news website is anymore, to be honest. But it doesn't have to be a sports centric site that necessarily went after that information. But and honestly, yeah, like I said, doesn't really feel like anyone is all that interested in it.
All right, last two things I want to ask here is what should Kirby Smart do and what should all the rest of us do? So what should Kirby Smart do here if they are in a position where the collectives are fining players? There was a player, and again, on this AJC list that listed the 27 incidents, and some players were on there more than once. There was a player who was on there 3 times, and again, they're not all the same, but a lot of them are like really speeding, right? For instance, the recruiting staffer who was killed when she was driving drunk and was driving 100 in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. She had previous tickets. She was going 74 in a 55, 88 in a 65, 64 in a 40, and 77 in a 55. So who among us doesn't have a speeding ticket? That's like 19 over, 23 over, 24 over, 22 over. And it appears that the allegations in the civil suit are that Georgia knew about that, and Georgia kept saying, like, yeah, here are the keys to our car, drive players around. So they're not all the same, but it is a pattern at this point. If the collectives are finding people, there was a player who, I interrupted myself, who was on that list 3 times, who was never suspended or anything. He wasn't dismissed from the team. He wound up leaving the team. He just went in the transfer portal after having it 3 times. Now, Kirby said they did dismiss this player from February. I, over time, did come around on the idea of, if you believe you have a player in your program who has a problem, just kicking him off the team might not be the best way to help that young person straighten his life out. But you can keep him off the field. You're on the team. You're just not allowed to play. And they all want to play. So to be punitive of, like, you're suspended for half the season. Anybody who gets a reckless driving, if you get a reckless driving, 2 games. If there's alcohol involved, 4 games minimum. I had confrontations with Jim Tressel 15 years ago because he suspended a player who got a DUI for a quarter. And I was like, 1 quarter? Like, what are you doing? And there were, like, mitigating circumstances there, and the guy had never done it before, but I still thought that wasn't enough. So, like, to act like, what are we supposed to do? You don't have to kick them all off the team because you want to help them. But you can, and then that hurts the football team too, especially if it's good players. By the way, the guy that got kicked off the team, backup.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with the starters. But I think absolutely there is room for Kirby Smart to be more punitive with, and I don't really want to hear about, like, running steps. That's middle school stuff to me.
Right.
Like, if you're going to be in the big boy, you're suspended. You're suspended for games. You're part of the team. There is required counseling and classes you have to attend, and we're going to check up on you, but you also are losing playing time, which hurts the team. I think that's where he should start. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think that's where it starts too, and it just at the moment doesn't feel like there's much in the way of consequences. Because, like, what is Classic City finding people? Like, I have no idea. I have questions about how they're even allowed to find people, and, like, the machinations of that, because that doesn't actually seem like something that should be doable. But even beyond that, like, I think like real consequences relative to playing time are what Kirby needs to do. And, like, Smell Munden's a starter. So, like, and it's not to, like, hold him up as, like, the poster boy that, like, needs to bear the brunt of everyone else who wasn't punished before him, but, like, maybe that's the position he's now found himself in because of this. I don't know. We'll see. But I think like, when a important player crosses the line in this way and it is part of a greater issue, the only way to actually nip it in the bud is to have actual consequences relative to playing time, because I think that in the end is all anyone cares about. As a player, like, it's like what is the thing that's actually going to catch my attention? Like, oh, that guy didn't play for 6 games because he did this. So I think that's it. I don't believe that Georgia will actually do it, but short of that, I don't know what actually gets the point across to people.
Now, I do believe there's going to be an ongoing conversation, and I think Mike Gundy went down this road a little bit of when he stuck his foot in his mouth about not suspending running back Ollie Gordon for a DUI. But the more that players are viewed as employees and the more they are paid, and it's not a top-down coach to player, I'm in charge of your life in every way, which I think is better for everybody. But if the more that that's not the case, I think we will get to the point where coaches say, well, what can I even do? Like, do I even have the ability to suspend a player? For instance, Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns had a terrible accident where he was speeding, and it was found out after the fact that he had multiple high-speed violations, and I don't think he was ever suspended. It was more like, oh, we hope he's okay. But, you know, that's part. Is that not part of the deal with pro sports, that we expect pro athletes on occasion to do terrible things and there are no consequences because they're millionaires? Yeah. Aren't we used to that as society?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So is that the new world for college sports? that we just have to accept this. Like the old days of like punishing transgressions, are those gone in the NIL and now direct payment of player world?
Yeah, I think so. And like, this is not, I think maybe especially because of like the way things are structured or the lack thereof, I get probably is more to the point. Like, you don't want to suspend a guy 6 games for a traffic violation because you're worried that he's going to transfer, right? Like, even in the NFL, like you can suspend a guy for being a bonehead and like he's not, like, he's under contract, he's not going to go anywhere. That's not the case with college. It's like players can come and go almost as they please, which further complicates, I think, the way that you dole out discipline for various issues. So yeah, maybe we are entering that territory for different reasons, but entering that territory nonetheless.
So then what can we do, right? If you don't have faith in the people in charge of Georgia do anything, maybe you do, maybe you don't, maybe you feel like the world is changing and they can't do anything. What can we do? I think that there's still enough, college football is still enough different from professional sports that I think we can have a little bit more of an expectation of there are behavioral things that matter a little bit more. I don't, maybe that's naive. I don't think we're all the way there though on the professionalization scale where it's just like, yeah, sometimes millionaires are going to break the law. What are you going to do? Yeah. So I think we have to shame Georgia. I think we have to brand Georgia. I think we have to consider them a rogue program. I think if we want to call an outlaw program, a dangerous program, that we have to apply the butt to Georgia. And that has happened previously in college football. Some people embrace that. Some people don't like it, but at least hey, those guys, they don't play by the rules. So Georgia doesn't play by the rules. They don't play by driving rules. I don't know if Kirby was trolling us, but he used a quote from Indiana Jones at the beginning of his public news conference, and he said, "It's not the years, it's the mileage." And I was like, "We're doing a mileage analogy here? Are we seriously like, I got to kick the tires on how our team is? Like, are you just going to use driving analogies here?" So I'm branding them. They're a rogue program. They can't be trusted. I would not send anybody in my family to be part of the Georgia football program now because I would be worried about their health and safety. That's just a fact. So let's brand them. I don't know if anybody else is going to, but I'm telling you, that is not at all the consensus. I'm not sure there's another single person who's saying that.
No.
Brand them. Rogue program. Can't be trusted. Dangerous. Winning, but I don't want to hear about heartwarming stories from the Georgia football program. I'm out. I don't care about them until they get the driving thing under control. We'll still talk about the football. Wins and losses, okay? Because we've talked about rogue programs and wins and losses before. But if you talk about like what was happening like in the Oklahoma athletic dorms in the Barry Switzer era, right? It's like, okay, do they not kind of have a reputation along with the winning, right? If you talk like so that's just lumped at the very least, let's lump Georgia in with that. They can't be heartwarming. They can't be cuddly because they're dangerous. So that's where I am with them. Is there anything else that we can advise fans and or media to do when they're thinking about or talking about the Bulldogs? I might even have to throw my dog mentality hat away because it's not funny.
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, other than kind of what we talked about, like keep asking about it. Like asking questions doesn't necessarily yield results, but it's another way of reminding people of what is, being allowed to transpire in that program. So no, but I think you said it well. I think I would just add on to that for the media covering it, like ask about it, and like don't use I guess like don't use like SEC media days as like the one time a year you're going to ask about it, like until it happens again, right? Like keep it front of mind.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a lot of faith in anything major happening here. I don't at the moment have a lot of faith in Georgia taking the steps to turn this around. I will be happy to be proven wrong on that. I don't have a lot of faith in national media taking up getting an apartment in Athens and really digging into this. I don't know. But at the very least, let's call Georgia what it is: a very successful football program that has a very serious real life problem that has directly led to death of 2 people, and is a problem that is clearly ongoing and not under control. And they are accountable to get that under control, because when you are in charge of an organization, you are responsible for everything that happens in that organization, whether it's a direct or indirect, right? And so Georgia needs to be better, and we need to hold them accountable until they are. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about other football stuff from SEC Media Days. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Doug and Bill back on. I'm trying to think. We're Kings of the North and we're agitators of the South. I don't know what we are. This is a very Southern show. So SEC Media Days, as we record this on Tuesday, they're in day 2. They'll have day 3 and 4 on Wednesday and Thursday. Our Thursday show will focus a little bit on the gaping hole that Nick Saban left in college football and what that means for Alabama and what it means for the sport at large. It is just still, isn't it a little bit weird to see Nick Saban just like talk? He's like talking about Alabama in the third person, right? Like he's sort of just talking about like when Georgia lost to Alabama last year, or Alabama, needs to improve its secondary. And it's just like, oh, yeah, that's you.
It was odd. He also said something on Tuesday about like, he's like, well, at Alabama and Georgia, people think like it's hard to get early playing time, but our roster turns over so much that it's actually easier than you'd think for incoming freshmen to get playing time. And in the back of my mind is like, Caleb DeBoer is probably screaming at his television right now that you're like recruiting for Georgia. Knock it off, Nick.
Yeah.
You were the Alabama head coach 2 months ago. Can you show a little loyalty?
And I like that he definitely, in talking about Alabama's shortcomings, it's like he really has focused on the secondary, which is just, I got Caleb Downs to come here. I left.
Yeah.
Caleb Downs went to Ohio State. So he can talk about a shortcoming of Alabama that's not blamed on him. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for the Alabama show that we're going to do on Thursday, and to my point that I think we have gone, because Paul Feinbaum said this. Paul Feinbaum said, and we've said versions of this. Lots of people have said versions of this, that like Kirby Smart's the next Nick Saban. Paul Feinbaum leaned into that, Monday, and like really said it. So I just wanted, do you want to guess what Nick Saban's record was in SEC championship games?
Oh. How many years was he at Alabama?
Like 17, 18.
In SEC championship games, I'll say he was like 9-3.
Oh, that's really good. 9-1.
Okay.
9-1. He lost to Urban Meyer in his first one, and then he never lost again. Do you know what Kirby Smart is in SEC championship games?
He's like, is he like 2-4 or 2-3?
He is 2-4. Yeah, he's 2-4. He's 2-4. Do you know how many times Georgia has beaten Alabama in the SEC championship game?
Once. Oh, 0? Oh, yeah. So they beat Florida and they beat
LSU in 22, like 50-20. Right.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Like the other, the past 3 years when they played Bama, they lost both times. So guess what? He's not Nick Saban. This is not. I've been watching a lot of tennis, and it's like the passing of the torch with a lot of tennis stuff, right? And my daughter and I have been talking about it. It's like Carlos Alcaraz just took apart Novak Djokovic, who I
destroyed
despise.
Him. It was pretty. It was pretty great to watch Novak get his butt kicked.
But this would be like if Novak Djokovic was still beating up Carlos Alcaraz, and then people are like, Carlos Alcaraz is the next Novak Djokovic. And you'd be like, well, he can't beat him. So we're giving it. Kirby Smart and Nick Saban played at Wimbledon on center court like 3 times, and Nick Saban kicked his butt every time. And we're like, oh, you're Nick now. No, you're not. So how good do you think George is going to be this year? Because like the guy, the SEC people are so in the bag for Georgia. It's like it's almost anti the rest of the league. But like the guy on the SEC Media Network was like, Carson Beck's the best quarterback in college football. And it's like, first of all,
Jordan Rodgers. The guy is Jordan Rodgers.
Who is that? Is that Aaron Rodgers' brother?
Yeah.
It is his brother, but aren't they mad at each other?
Isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I can't keep all the Rodgers straight.
He kind of looks like him. Is this the guy that was on The Bachelor?
I can't remember.
I'm Googling him now.
He's a Vanderbilt quarterback, but it's just like, do you have
he's the younger brother of Aaron Rodgers. Yes.
Okay. So I just like, it's like we've gone from, again, the media so quickly adapted because we went from a world where Alabama was good and everybody turned that into the SEC is good. And it's like, okay, well, really, it's just Alabama being great and everybody else is fine. They're good, but they're not Alabama. And they've just applied that to Georgia, I think, in a way that is not true. It doesn't mean that Georgia's not good, but there is no way that Georgia is as good as SEC media and a lot of national media think they are. And I will bang that drum all year because guess what? Last year proved it because they didn't play anybody for 2 months. They had some decent wins in November, and then Nick Saban beat them.
Yeah.
So you think Georgia's going to be good or no? You think they're going to be good?
Yeah. I mean, do I think they're going to be good? Yeah. Do I think they're going to be the best college football team we've ever seen? Like they kind of get treated as? No, but like there are sound football reasons to think that Georgia's going to be good this year. Carson Beck is very good. That offensive line could be the best in college football. They got Trevor Etienne. Their defensive line should be pretty good. I do think there's like legitimate questions about their secondary aside from Malachi Starks. Like, and I know they were talking about that a lot. Like that could actually be the thing that ends up kind of catching them and keeps them from winning a national title. But like, yeah, I think they're good. I don't know that they're like automatic 100% deserving of being the number one team in the country, but I think they are clearly in that upper tier with Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas.
So I know they didn't lose to Alabama 3 years in a row, and they have 2 national championships, but it's like Ohio State has been really good and then not gotten it done at the end of the year. And there are a lot of people questioning Ohio State, right? And rightly so. They're good, but again, there's a huge but applied to Ohio State. It's like, oh, they better get it done this year. And like Georgia did not win the national title last year. Georgia didn't even make the playoff. And that Jordan Rodgers guy was like, well, you know, they're the best team in college football last year. It's like, no, they weren't. Like they're so in the bag. Be more in the bag. You cover a whole conference. Texas is good. Oklahoma's going to be better than people think. Tennessee's going to be better than people think. Don't be so in the bag for Georgia. It is one of the great myths of college football the last couple of years that Georgia has been this unstoppable force. Yes, they won 2 national titles, but they are not an unstoppable force. They are not. They are a good program that has had some breaks go their way and also didn't win some other big games that they were supposed to win. In the bag. God, he's not. It diminishes Nick Saban to apply all of the Saban aura and respect to Kirby Smart because he worked for him for a decade. Earn it.
Yeah. What's the nature abhors a vacuum thing, right? So like they gotta put somebody in there. So like it might as well be Kirby. But you're right. No, he does get help. Like even like, and I had not watched all of SEC media days. So is everybody getting asked of like what they think of Steve Sarkisian in Texas, or is like Kirby the one who gets asked about it because like Kirby is now the spokesman for the league in lieu of Nick Saban?
I assume it's some Texas radio guy because they're in Texas. You get asked about the hometown team. Okay, so Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, most powerful man in college sports. Like he gave his sort of state of the state address to kick things off on Monday. Like I think the two big things, like he kind of said they like 16. Obviously, there's a lot percolating with people thinking are Florida State and Clemson going to leave the ACC. Reports like neither the SEC nor the Big Ten are interested. I actually think, and we talked about this with Big 12 Media Days last week, that if we reach a point where it's North and South and a third conference, it's kind of like the upstart underdog, WWE conference. I kind of have come around on that. If the SEC doesn't want them, I don't know. We don't know. But are you kind of viewing this that we might wind up seeing Florida State and Clemson in the Big 12?
Yes, I guess so. Like I it's a little hard for me to fathom like not wanting them. Like if they are like, does the tune change once they actually become available? Is what I'm wondering. Although the one quote I think was like Brett McMurphy put out there, and I don't know who it came from. they said like about Florida State, like they've been a disruptive partner. We don't want them to be a part of our league. It's like, because Florida State has damaged itself that much in this ongoing saga with the ACC that like the SEC and the Big Ten don't want them. Like that's that's kind of crazy to me, but it does sound like that's the case. So yeah, I think we could be staring at both of those teams, or at least Florida State anyway, perhaps going to the Big 12.
So the other thing is that Greg Sankey talked about the idea of sort of college football solving its own problems. And I think he was talking more about private equity and private equity investing in college sports. If he's talking about like Congress, the NCAA keeps begging Congress to like save college sports. So if he is coming out against private equity, I think that's good. Again, this whole idea of would you take outside money to prop up your athletic programs while you're starting to have to pay players to sort of stay afloat, I do think is a very dangerous road to go down. I wonder if we get to the point where it's like the Big Ten and the SEC are fine. They don't need to do that. And Greg Sankey is like telling his members, like, don't go the route of private equity. I promise we're going to make enough money on our own. And then the Big 12 is like, well, we will take anything.
Yeah.
And that, right? Like it's just hedge funds own every part of the Big 12. And that's another way that the Big 12 winds up different, but the Big 10 and the SEC are more stable. I think I understand the idea if he's like just trying to sell stability. The world is changing, but we'll be fine. Don't go crazy. The 16 teams in this room.
Yeah, no, I like obviously there he comes at that from a position of power, right? Like the SEC is just living in a different world than the Big 12 is. So like I understand why the Big 12 is seemingly more aggressive in that regard, and the SEC and the Big 10 don't need to be like. And I'm glad for that anyway. Like I hope that Tony Petitti might say something similar at Big 10 Media Days. Like anything to keep college football from going down that road, I think is a good thing. And those guys obviously both have big voices to help maybe steer the sport away from it. Whether or not it will actually work, I don't know, but I'm glad they're at least saying it. It does make me wonder, like, if that's the case, and like if they don't have interest in that, and all anyone cares about is like the bottom dollar and how much each institution is making, like, will it ever come a point where the SEC and the Big 10 feel like they need to trim the fat a little bit and like not necessarily lose, not cut down on the number of teams of their conference, like reconfigure in a way, like, for example, the Big 10 like dropping a Rutgers to bring in like a Notre Dame kind of thing, right? Like if there's a school / athletic program that is perceived to not be carrying its share of the weight, which like clearly that dynamic already exists, could that lead to some shifts that way if you are trying to avoid the infusion of private equity in college football? So like it may be like quasi more an alert for that, but otherwise I was like pretty happy to hear Greg Sankey say that.
All right, last thing, we would talk a little bit about Brian Kelly and LSU, because he used to be in the North and he's just Brian Kelly. So he wants LSU to play in Ireland, I guess, because Notre Dame played in Ireland one time and he liked it. And it's like, I don't know if there are a lot of Irish people in Louisiana, but it just I mean, I get Florida State and Georgia Tech are playing in Ireland this year. It's not only Notre Dame that plays there. Like Northwestern and Nebraska played there 2 years ago. Like, I get it. It just was like, dude, you don't work at Notre Dame anymore.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, there's a lot of Catholic people in Louisiana. Maybe
go to Ireland though?
No, I think they just want to go to New Orleans. Hang out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Just play at the Superdome. Yeah, I don't know. Brian Kelly trying to Irish up LSU. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I've been to Baton Rouge one time. Maybe there is a robust Irish community in Baton Rouge that I am unaware of, and Brian Kelly has fully immersed himself in. But yeah, I don't. Those two things don't quite add up for me. It was just like another reminder for like Brian Kelly, you don't belong here. Like you belong at Notre Dame. You like no one has ever looked more like a Notre Dame fan than Brian Kelly. He needs to be running that program, even like for all of his qualities, good and bad. I think like that felt like kind of a perfect fit, and this still feels like a little odd to me, even going into what this is his third year now there.
And it's so weird to just track. LSU is going to be an interesting team to track this year in the way that they are discussed and voted upon, and then what they actually do, because they had a great offense last year and they lost their Heisman winning quarterback, 2 receivers who went in the first round, and their offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And their defense was so bad, they fired literally the entire defensive staff. And they're like, oh, we got it now. It's like, do you? Do you? And I know they're pumping up Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, and I think Nick Saban compared him to Mac Jones, but I don't know. Was Mac Jones good, or was Mac Jones just throwing and handing the ball off to a bunch of first-round guys? Like I think there's going to be a swirl around LSU and optimism that is not at all warranted because, again, it's the SEC.
Yeah, and like in a way that could be bad for Brian Kelly too, right? Like it's not. Brian Kelly is an excellent football coach, right? I think he's won like 10 games every year for like the last decade of both LSU and Notre Dame. Or maybe it's not quite a decade, but it's been a long time. But that's not how LSU perceives itself. Like it's not, LSU is not happy with merely winning 10 games. So like if there's expectations following this team this year, even if they're totally unfounded, or not based in reality, when LSU comes up short of those expectations, folks are going to be upset down at Baton Rouge.
I'll call, and I know, I think Feinbaum said he thought Lincoln Riley should have been fired last year at USC, which felt a little hot. Unless it's just the SEC way. It's like, oh, you had a bad year, you're fired. We'll eat the $50 million buyout.
Paul Feinbaum has to say that because Lincoln Riley has spurned a new SEC brethren for USC. So
that's true.
He has to defend Oklahoma. Yeah.
So USC is not in the North, but we will embrace USC above anything in the actual Deep South. I think USC beats LSU in week 1 in Vegas. And I think we're going to have a shift of, I think people might be underestimated. Like it was as bad as it could get at USC last year. Right? There's actually like a lot of similarities, right? That USC got rid of its defensive coordinator because like they had to fix that side of the ball. And they're very similar. They lost a Heisman winner in Caleb Williams, and LSU lost a Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels. But I think I'd rather have Miller Moss than Garrett Nussmeier. And I think I might trust the depth of the skill position guys at USC more than I trust LSU. And they both have to get stuff fixed on the defensive side of the ball. I think USC beats LSU week 1, and we switch the perceptions of all those. I'm sure LSU is going to be in the top 10 in the preseason rankings, and USC might not even be in the top 25.
Yeah, I think LSU is going to win that game.
Yeah, lay that down for you. All right. This was an amazing stat I saw in the Yahoo Sports story talking about LSU playing in Ireland, potentially, if Brian Kelly gets his wish. While it's far from unprecedented in college football, playing internationally is not something the SEC does very often. Seemingly, the last time an SEC team played abroad was in 1937 when Auburn tied Villanova in Havana, Cuba. What is that sentence? Can you imagine? We're going to Cuba to play Villanova, and then you tie them? I want to spend the next month researching that game. We'll research it. We'll talk about it on the next show.
That should be our next episode of The North Remembers. This is Villanova tying Auburn in Havana.
Oh, way to rise up. Way to rise up, Nova. Stand up for the North. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Kings of the North, Agitators of the South. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Saban Hole, coming on Thursday. Other great college football coaches who left and what happened, who filled the vacuum, both at their individual schools and also in the sport as a whole. I know that Kalen DeBoer is getting some recruiting wins lately, Bill, and that's a big deal. I still think it is being way underestimated what Nick Saban was there, and the idea that Bama is just going to keep it rolling. I don't know why. I would ask why that's not questioned more, but we just did an hour and 10 minutes about how nobody in the South questions anything when it comes to their teams. So maybe I shouldn't wonder.
that will get questioned, I think, more. You have a better chance of getting that question than you do the Georgia stuff, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks to you guys for making us part of your week. Make sure you subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter, KOTNCFB. And we just are grateful that you're part of what we do. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.